The Eindecker had the initial advantage of the interrupter mechanism gun, but other than that, it was not a good plane. At Washington State University, aeronautical engineering students are doing stability tests on a 1/4 size Eindecker model. They hope to reveal just how unstable the German plane really was.
The kind of tactics that you'd like to have with a fighter are speed, the ability to get in and get out, and that means climb and dive performance, so structural strength helps with that.
The wind tunnel should give an accurate indication of the full-size Eindecker capabilities.
Okay, taking data.
I mean, right now the wing's at positive angle of attack, so we have lift. A wing to fly has to have an angle of attack. That's the angle relative to the oncoming flow. Now, when a pilot starts to climb, we have to increase the angle of attack.
You can see how the drag on the wires is stretching the wires on the top back a little bit with the lift, too.
These are basic Wright brothers principles. But even with a slight increase in climb, the Eindecker is in trouble. It rapidly loses lift and approaches a stall.
Okay, let's stop here.
Well, the problem is if the angle of attack gets too high, the air on the back side of the airfoil separates. In other words, it doesn't follow the surface, and we get what's called a stall. Now, a stall can happen in many ways. One is, on a typical airplane today, as we get higher and higher angle of attack, at the trailing of our wing, the air will stall and will move forward. So what happens is you actually start feeling the stall. You start getting a little buffeting on the wing. The pilots will recognize it.
It's pretty high. Bring it down about 4 inches or so.
In the Eindecker, if you have a sharper leading edge, when you get to a certain angle of attack, rather than the separation starting at the trailing edge, it starts immediately at the leading edge. And boom, all of a sudden you're flying, the next minute, slightly higher angle of attack, you're no longer flying.
I don't know if we want to go much higher.
The result could be a fatal spin even. I mean, it could be that catastrophic.
Abrupt stall. That was like, wow.
The world's first fighter was as dangerous for the pilot as it was for the enemy.
An airplane like the Eindecker against an airplane that would come out as little as a year later was nothing. I mean, it couldn't compete. In fact, barely compete with its own contemporaries. But it was that forward-firing machine gun that made such a big difference.
The Eindecker's reign was over in weeks, but the forward-firing machine gun was here to stay. It was easily fitted to increasingly formidable planes.
An aeroplane could go from a sketch into a flying machine within about 3 months.
And it wasn't just the planes that were being turned out quickly. With the war raging, pilot training was condensed into a few short weeks. Novices were thrown into skies that were becoming ever more treacherous.
Oswald Belke, the preeminent German fighter tactician, came up with the first real codified rules of aerial combat.
He instructed his pilot to fly grouped, with mutual protection, with a lot of speed, with the position of the sun in the back.
Never engage in combat until you've secured every possible advantage.
Come in by surprise, make your shots and get out.
Shoot at very close range and go away, whatever you achieve.
A new age was at hand, the age of the fighter ace, a concept of war not seen since the Middle Ages. These were the knights of the sky, locked in mortal combat. Every nation had its champions, and for every champion, the nations kept score. Britain had men like Billy Bishop, who alone downed 72 enemy aircraft, and Albert Ball, who shot down 44. France had René Fonck, 75 kills, and Georges Guynemer, 53. America had Eddie Rickenbacker with 26. Germany's first ace, Oswald Belke, had 40. And the greatest of them all, Manfred von Richthofen, the legendary Red Baron, had an astonishing 80 kills.
The ace is an invention of propaganda. It's good for the morale of population and it's good for the legend. So every country put in front of his aviator the aces.
The aces, especially the Germans, had clout. They could go into the factories and weapons depots and demand changes. Their need for faster, more powerful planes drove aircraft design forward.
A plane at the peak of performance and the best fighter on the front. In 2 or 3 months, if someone introduces a new fighter, will find itself lagging behind.
Von Richthofen himself had a hand in the development of a new triplane from Fokker. Georges Guynemer, the French ace, had his own plane modified to fit his favorite gun. This was a new concept in warplane design, custom-built to meet the requirements of the job and the demands of the aviator. 1916 to 1917 saw some of the classic fighters appear on the Western Front, each striving to outperform the other. One plane that would have its weeks of glory was another favorite of von Richthofen's. It arrived in the spring of 1917 and was directly responsible for a time history remembers as